Good morning, everybody, on this wet Sunday morning as the Labour Party gather in Liverpool for their annual conference, and there is one major topic of discussion. I've been saying for months and months here on LBC that I believe the Labour Party will move to a position where they'll certainly advocate we stay in a single market, but probably they're going to go for a second EU referendum. Well, we're very, very close to the moment of truth. Earlier on this morning, Andrew Gwynn, Shadow Secretary for Communities and Local Government, was speaking on LBC to Andrew Castle.
Of course, we've got to have the debates and the votes on it this week, and I have the misfortune of being interviewed before we've had those. It's not our position to have a second referendum. Actually, the people's vote that we want to have is a general election. But of course...
but will you respond to the members who do want, as Tom Watson and Jeremy Corbyn have said, will you respond to Labour Party members?
Well, of course, we're a democratic party.
Well, 86% of them want a second vote.
And I'm sure 100% of them want a general election. Conference will come to a view. That will then have to be discussed and debated by Shadow Cabinet. Keir Starmer, who leads on Brexit issues, has said that should the government come forward with a no-deal proposal, or a proposal that is not acceptable to Parliament, obviously the people's vote we want is a general election, but nothing's off the table. But there are a lot of questions to be had about a people's vote, not least what would the question be? Would it be on a deal, or would it be a rerun of the 2016 referendum?
Now, Andrew Gwynn there, classic of where Labour have been for the last 18 months. Ask them a straight question and you don't get an answer of any kind at all. It sort of worked pretty well for Corbyn, actually, in the general election of 2017, where he managed to get Remainers in London overwhelmingly voting for him and Leavers in the north of England voting for him by not being clear on where they stood on much of this. Here was Tom Watson, Deputy Leader, speaking to Sky News in the last 20 minutes.
Well, we decide our manifesto in the first few days of a general election, and there are a lot of things you need to factor in. The prevailing economic climate, the whole of the packages in there. It seems to me inconceivable that if the Labour Party democratically decides, the Labour Party Congress decides it wants a manifesto pledge on a people's vote, that we would defy that decision. But I'm already in the boundaries of talking hypotheticals with you. I think we need to have the debate at the conference and see what our delegates decide to do.
So nobody wants to commit at all because they don't want to be seen as going against the will of the people in a referendum. They fear that would make them very unpopular out there with many, many Labour voters. But if the Labour Party itself wants a second referendum, they will go along with it. And the Labour Party itself, well, it's a very different Labour Party to years ago. Years ago, of course, we had people like Tony Benn, people like Michael Foot. The old left of the Labour Party were fiercely Eurosceptic. They were opposed to us joining the common market back in the 1970s. They even fought the 1983 general election on a manifesto of withdrawal from the EEC. But the new left of the Labour Party, the new Momentum-style Labour Party, they believe that Brexit was a mistake and we should stay part of the European Union. Quite how this ties with their tradition of grassroots democracy, quite why they want people like Mr Tusk, and we saw his vile behaviour against the Prime Minister at Salzburg, and I don't care whether you're a Theresa May supporter or not, the thought that the leader of our country was treated like that by an unelected bureaucrat I thought was pretty disgusting. But that aside, the Labour Party membership favour EU membership, and they now want a second referendum. And there's a piece of YouGov polling, and it's out in today's Observer, and I have to say it is pretty overwhelming. 86% of Labour members that were polled want Labour to commit to a second referendum. And Jeremy Corbyn's no fool. He's not going to go against his party on this, despite the fact he's been a Brexiteer himself for 30 years. He also knows that the Parliamentary Labour Party is very much in favour of this too. So Corbyn has said he would back a second referendum if Labour members demand to do so at his party conference. Folks, it's an absolute slam dunk. They are going to vote to adopt a second referendum position. Now, my experience of leading a political party is that sometimes what your own activists want, what your own internal party wants, may make them feel very good about themselves, but doesn't necessarily translate more broadly to people who vote for a party. Activists, political activists tend to have slightly different priorities to ordinary voters out there who are not obsessed and absorbed by politics. So I'm going to ask you, will a second Brexit referendum as Labour policy make the party more electable? And if you think, yep, the Labour members feel that way, the country is feeling that way, call 0345 6060 973, or maybe you think, actually, if Labour do this, there'll be a lot of Labour voters who'll never vote for the party again, in which case text to 84850. And tell me, would a second referendum be good for this country, do you think? Let me know your thoughts by tweeting using the hashtag Farage and LBC at LBC. And as ever, Facebook Livers, you can comment there too. I will read out your messages, particularly the cleaner ones. Look, my view, folks, is if they do this, when they do this in Birmingham in the next few days, the members and activists, Momentum, all those people, MPs like Kinnock, etc., they'll all feel really good about themselves and think they've done the right thing. But they might just be missing something, which is, if you really look at the polling, it's only about 25% of this country who think we should abandon Brexit, who think there should be an exit from Brexit. Now, I know in general elections people vote on more than one issue, but hey, this is the one that is very much dominating our lives. There are 5 million people who voted Brexit and then voted for Corbyn at the next general election. There was some polling out the other day that suggested that in marginal seats this could cost Labour a significant number of seats. Against that, I guess you have to weigh up, why would you bother to vote Lib Dem? Vince Cable's whole shtick with the British public has been he wants an exit from Brexit, he wants another referendum. They're on 7 or 8% in the polls. But if the Labour Party adopt that position, I think they would then pick up some votes from a Liberal Democrat. So I do see some gains for Labour in doing this, but I think the potential losses far outweigh it. I think going for a second Brexit referendum, as they're about to do, will make Labour less electable. Tell me I'm wrong. 0345 6060 973. And of course, every Sunday morning across all forms of media, there are innumerable radios, shows, television shows, where you can see journalists interviewing politicians, or more likely journalists interviewing journalists, and talking amongst each other in the Westminster bubble. But at LBC, what matters is what the public think. And I'm going to go to Peter in Wimbledon, a regular caller to this show. And Peter, you've always been quite a strong Remainer, haven't you?
Absolutely correct, yeah.
Yeah, so do you think this move makes them more electable?
I think they've been quite clever. They sat on the fence for quite a while, as you rightly pointed out, thinking which way the public mood's going to swing. And that's basically the danger of politics in this time, is that Jeremy Corbyn is seeing that public is waking up to the dangers of Brexit, and he is going to be offering the solution. And he himself, as you rightly said, is deep down Brexiteer, even though publicly he would never say that. For me, as a Remainer, the bigger danger is that we will crash out without a deal, and most likely will damage the economy of the country so badly for the generations to come. And I voiced an opinion of one of the leading Brexiteers, one on your side, who said early on that democracy ceases to be democracy if it can't change its mind. So if a lot of our politicians can change their mind, why are you, Nigel, so against people being able to change their mind in light
Peter,
of new facts?
Well, Peter, I would say, you talk about no deal. Well, there is no such thing as no deal in a sense, because, we have an established form of rules across the world by which most global trade is done, and they are the WTO rules. So I would say, Peter, in answer to you, no deal, no problem, although I'd much rather us have a simple free trade deal with our European neighbours, something that they've been saying for the last 20 years we could have. We can argue, Peter, for or against. In terms of, in a democracy, changing your mind, we haven't even Brexited yet. We have to fulfil the will of the people first, and if a few years down the road people say, hey, this isn't working, maybe in 10 or 20 years there's an argument for a second referendum. To me, Peter, the danger of a second referendum is it will destroy people's faith in the whole democratic system of this country. So I feel very strongly that way. But Peter, here's the problem, right? Getting back to the question, as opposed to the debate over Brexit, where you and I will never agree, but we do so, I hope, in a fairly civil manner. Here's the point, Peter. You are convinced of those arguments, and I understand that. But it really is only about 25% of the country that really do not want Brexit to happen. And when it comes to wanting a second referendum, well, about 40% say, yeah, OK, let's have a second referendum. But quite a significant number of those, Peter, are Leave voters who are happy to vote again. How does this electorally help Jeremy Corbyn unless a lot more people come to your point of view?
Well, it's all about swing voters, Nigel. And the thing is that people became more informed since the referendum. They know much, much more than they knew then. And a lot of people on your side used to say to the public, guys, we're never going to leave a single market. Like people like Daniel Hannan.
He was the only single Brexit person with any voice at all.
Well, who's Owen Paterson who said you'd be mad to leave a single market? But anyway, coming back to your question,
I'm not sure about that, but anyway, go on.
Yeah, he did. You guys have sold so many lies to the British public.
Oh,
and you know,
for God's sake.
Nigel, but you know.
There's one big lie, Peter, isn't there?
Nigel.
There's one big lie. You're joining a common market. It's not about politics. And they lied to us for 50 years. For 50 years. For 50 years, they tried to pretend we were in control of large sectors of our life when we weren't.
Nigel, the reason you are against the second referendum, because you cannot sell the same lies to the British public again. And the problem is that you can't be driving a bus around the country with £35 million written on the back of it. You can't be standing in front of a poster of Syrian refugees entering Germany and telling they're affecting the British people's lives.
Do you know what, Peter? Do you know what, Peter? If there was a second referendum, I wouldn't change a single thing I said or did last time. I really wouldn't. But hey, Peter from Wimbledon thinks it'll be a good thing for the Labour Party because he thinks more people will wake up to the dangers of Brexit. I think he's wrong. I think Labour are in great danger of losing in South Wales, in the Midlands and the north of England. Big Brexit voting areas with very large numbers of Labour MPs. I think it will cost them seats. That's my view. You're listening to the Sunday edition of the Nigel Farage Show here on LBC, and it is 10:15. The Labour Party in Liverpool will, this week, without doubt, have a debate, have a vote, endorse a second Brexit referendum, and Jeremy Corbyn and the leadership will go with it. All of that has been said overnight. Jeremy Corbyn making that very, very clear. Does this make them more electable? No, folks. They will be betraying 5 million Labour voters who voted for Brexit, not for the chance to change their minds. Paul on Facebook says, a second referendum equals fake democracy. Andy on Facebook says, I can't believe people think we should have another vote to stay in the EU. We already had a vote. Pompous lunatics. And Philip in Whiteleaf. Now, this is interesting. Nigel, I'm a Labour Party member who voted for Corbyn, but if they go for a second referendum, I will tear up my membership. Philip, there may not be many members of the Labour Party who do what you intend to do when this happens this week, but I think there are lots and lots of Labour voters. I was in Bolton yesterday and in some of the suburbs of Bolton. Big, solid Labour areas, just one Tory MP and the whole of that conurbation. And believe you me, they will not be impressed by a Labour Party that they see to be led from North London that wants to reverse the Brexit vote. They really won't. Staying in the North West, I'm going to Manchester, speaking to Graham, who is a new caller to this show. Good morning, Graham.
Morning, Nigel.
So, are you a Labour man, Graham?
I'm not a Labour man, no.
Okay.
I'm absolutely not. I'm a Tory.
You're a Tory. And what is your view? I mean, you know, you're living in Labour land up there. Labour have most of the seats in the northwest of England.
Well, my MP is Graham Brady, so not really.
Right. Yeah, well, there are some Conservatives, but overwhelmingly...
Yeah, they are, yeah.
Overwhelmingly, it's Labour.
Yeah.
And some of those majorities in those seats are not that big. Does a second referendum make them more electable or not?
I think it makes them less electable, but the question, the whole thing has become slightly idiotic, because the question is, how can Jeremy Corbyn say he would support a second referendum if he doesn't know what the referendum question is going to be? If the referendum question was leave on May's deal or leave on WTO rules, would he support that? And if he did, what are the 86% of Labour members who want a second referendum going to think about it?
Well, the truth of it, Graham, is the driving forces in the Labour Party behind this, as indeed in the Liberal Democrats, they want to reverse the referendum result. They want us to stay as members. That's what's driving this, isn't it?
Well, yes, it is. But who's going to decide the question in a second referendum?
Oh, they haven't got to that yet. No.
Well, but that's
that little detail. That little detail
is so idiotic, because how can he support a second referendum if they've not decided what the question is going to be?
Because his party want to reverse Brexit, Graham. That's what this vote will say, isn't it?
So if a second referendum was agreed upon, and the second referendum questions were leave on May's deal or leave on WTO rules, is he going to support that?
No, clearly the Labour Party would not support that.
But he just said he's going to support a second referendum.
Yeah, well, the common denominator behind everybody calling for a second referendum, Graham, is they want the option for us to stay in. Some have proposed 3-part questions, etc., but they all want the option for us to stay in. And I think, particularly in areas like the North West, this would cost Labour votes.
As a Leave voter, I wouldn't object to a second referendum if the options were to leave or to leave without a deal.
Yeah, I know. It's not very likely our political class, Graham, are going to give us that. But
who is going to decide the question?
Well, ultimately, the government, the House of Commons, and the Electoral Commission. So, we're not going to get the choice you want, Graham. If we do have a second referendum, there will be an option to stay in the European Union. Of that, I'm sure. Graham, I thank you very much indeed for your call. Andrew, who is new to this show, is calling from Northumberland. Good morning.
Hi, Nigel. Great to speak to you.
Good morning. Welcome.
Hi. Let me just preface my comments by saying, I'm have been a lifelong Labour supporter.
Yes.
All my family were, but I would say real Labour. The Labour of Tony Benn, Peter Shaw, all those great figures from the past.
Yes.
Momentum's Labour, to me, is not Labour. And that's why I won't vote for them at the moment. But to answer your question...
Andrew, just 1 second. Do you see the new Labour Party, not Blair's, but this new Labour Party that you've talked about with all this dominance from Momentum, etc., do you see it as a very London-dominated party now?
Absolutely. I do speak to some people in the north and northeast who are Labour supporters, but they are overwhelmingly very well off, live in nice, very nice houses, with professional jobs. They do not represent the ordinary working man. Certainly not in the north of England, and I don't believe in the south of England. But I'd like to answer your question. Will this make Labour more electable?
Yeah.
Well, I think it will have the opposite effect, and for this reason. I think Theresa May is a dreadful Prime Minister. I think she's cocked up Brexit in a I don't know whether it's willful, but she's a terrible Prime Minister. But I think it gives her the golden ticket, because she can then say, yeah, you vote for us, you're voting to uphold democracy. If you vote Labour, you're voting for anti-democracy.
Yes, I mean, actually, Andrew, if the Conservative Party was united around a Brexit position, it would literally be a golden opportunity for them, wouldn't it?
It would. I mean, I can't remember the film, Nigel, but one of the Clint Eastwood films, I think there's a line in it where it says, where Clint Eastwood says, "Go on, punk, make my day."
Make my day, yeah, absolutely.
And I think Theresa May and the Conservatives will be absolutely welcoming this quietly, with open arms, because it will give them, and it would be, you either, if you believe in a democratic, democratic political system, you vote, you don't vote for the Labour Party. If you believe in that you're ruled by an elite, kind of semi-fascist elite, then you vote Labour.
Would you, Andrew? Would you? And by the way, at 11 o'clock, folks, we're going to discuss Theresa May and what her next move is, because if she wasn't on this checkers kick, she could actually begin to unite her party, I think. But assuming, Andrew, the Conservatives were able to find some sense of unity, could you find yourself, and you've said, you come from a Labour family, could you find yourself on this Brexit issue particularly, could you find yourself voting Conservative?
If she checkers, you see, Theresa May is all words so far. no action.
No, but
I mean,
I'm taking the assumption,
Yeah.
and it may be wrong, but I'm taking the assumption that she comes up with a much clearer Eurosceptic position for a clean break Brexit. Could you, in those circumstances, as a Labour man, find yourself voting Conservative?
Yes.
Okay.
If I really believe it was a clean break and she took the money off the table and said,
Yep.
right, we're going to actually
Yep.
go with, democratic decision, and then maybe offer a referendum down the line, 10, 20 years.
Okay,
But
Andrew,
I
listen,
don't-
thanks for your call. Great call. Interesting. I think, folks, there are lots of people like Andrew in South Wales, the Midlands, and the north of England. They come from Labour families. They've been Labour voters. They supported Brexit. I think if the Labour Party go for this position, and it's a huge if, given the Conservative Party are probably more divided at the moment than they've ever been in their history, but if they were able to unite around a clear position, there are lots of voters like Andrew that I think where you would see marginal seats in those three big regions going from Labour to the Conservatives. That is my contention. Valerio is a new caller from Bracknell. Good morning.
Good morning, Nigel. Thank you very much for taking my call. I would like to tell you that you are probably one of the best public speakers in the planet.
Well, that's extremely kind of you, Valerio. Thank you. That's cheered up my Sunday morning no end. But as to the question, by adopting a second referendum, does it make Mr. Corbyn and the Labour Party more electable? What do you think?
I do not think so, for the reason that Corbyn wants to appeal to a lot of blue collars, working class people who massively supported Brexit.
Yes.
And if he does go for a second referendum, then all these people will feel betrayed. I think it would be a boomerang for him.
So, isn't it funny? I mean, the Labour Party traditionally have been the working class party of this country. It's almost as if, Valerio, isn't it? The new membership don't really represent traditional Labour voters.
I agree with that, especially with Brexit. If the Labour leader would have been Tony Blair, who was a bit more right-wingish, to some extent, I would have said, okay, it makes sense that they support a second referendum. But because Corbyn wants to, represent those people, but he decides to go for a second referendum, he would betray them. And on top of that, his opposition hasn't really helped the working class people to achieve better working conditions at the moment. I'm not sure whether you agree with that.
I don't think it has particularly, and I think actually one of the problems that Labour had from Blair onwards is that it appeared to be a party that was actually supporting more middle-class types, or in the case of Peter Mandelson saying, we don't mind people getting filthy rich. I think, Valerio, the Labour Party is now completely run by a sort of North London mindset, and it's very much lost touch with a huge group of people out there. As you rightly described, Valerio, it was the working classes of this country that overwhelmingly voted for Brexit. I thank you very much indeed for your call. Peter in Lancing says, I understood this referendum was to be a once in a generation. Another referendum would surely dilute our democracy. Peter, as I say, I was up in Bolton yesterday on a platform, and I was there with Kate Hoey, lifelong Labour supporter, been an MP for 30 years, and one of the comments that was made is if Tony Benn was still alive, he'd have been on that platform yesterday afternoon. His central point about Europe was the problem was it diluted our democracy. Do those arguments still matter to Labour voters? Maybe not at the conference at Liverpool, but out in the country, I believe they do. You're listening to a Sunday edition of Nigel Farage Show here on LBC. It's now 10:30 and the Labour Party are gathering in Liverpool for their conference, and it's pretty clear there's going to be a debate and a vote on whether the Labour Party should go for a second EU referendum. Overnight polling from YouGov shows us that 86% of the Labour Party members who were polled want that second referendum, and Jeremy Corbyn, despite having been very clear in the lead up to the general election that we were leaving the European Union, we were leaving the single market, is in such a position that there's actually nothing he can do if his party conference votes that way, if his MPs feel that way. And he said overnight in an interview in the Sunday Mirror that he would back a second referendum if that is what Labour members wanted. He was made leader to empower the membership. So we are on the verge of what I see as a huge betrayal by Labour of everything they've said about this referendum from 2016 onwards. I'm asking you, Does this help their electoral prospects or not? I think it damages them in a big, big way. Before that, you may have seen Sky News. There's been a bidding war for Sky News. Rupert Murdoch, of course, holding a huge stake in Sky News, but the controlling stake was up for sale. And the story we had for months and months and months is that Murdoch wanted to buy the rest of Sky News. And that led to a company called Comcast coming in to do the bidding. Now, I'm going to bet that not 1 in 100 of you have even heard of Comcast before the last 2 days. So let's talk about who they are. They are an American broadcaster. They own Universal. They own NBC. Last year, they acquired Euronews, TV channel that is there across Europe that has over 3 million viewers every single day. Now they've got Sky News. Comcast are now one of the most important media broadcasters in the world. And I wouldn't be surprised if we didn't see them acquiring more companies. Remember that name, Comcast. They're going to be a much bigger part of our national debate over the years to come. And an interesting thought. When all of this started, Sky News shares were about 12 quid. All right? So Rupert Murdoch says, I'm going to buy the rest of the controlling stake. Suddenly the shares start to rise a little bit. Then Comcast come in and say, we want to buy the controlling stake. And Murdoch says, I really, 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 really want to take this controlling stake. And Comcast say, we really, 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 really want to buy this controlling stake. And so the way it was settled is there was a closed bid. Literally, they put their prices in an envelope as to what they were prepared to pay for the controlling stake, and it went to the highest bidder. Murdoch bid £15.67 for the shares. Comcast bid £17.24. Rupert Murdoch is an 88-year-old Australian. He is a most extraordinary figure. I've met him many times. I have to say, always find him very interesting, very entertaining, incredibly up to speed for a man of his age. I tell you what, folks, he didn't want to buy the controlling stake in Sky News. What he did was to ramp the price up, and he's basically selling that he basically allowed, his share price of what he owns in Sky to now be worth billions more than it was before. Clever old him is all I can say. Right, let's get back to the Labour Party. Charlie on Facebook says, when will they listen? We've already voted once! ! Roger says, momentum rule Labour now. It does look, Roger, a little bit like that. Andrew says, I would love to see Labour calling for another referendum. That would be the final nail in the party's coffin. Well, you say that, Andrew, but the Tories are having a pretty good job at tearing themselves to pieces. And Lynn says, Corbyn voted against the EU every time. How could he support a second referendum? Lynn, because he is boxed in by his own party, completely and utterly. That's the point Swivel-Eyed Loon from Worthing makes. He's boxed in. He's got to cop out. The British voters expect him, though, to represent them, not the Labour Party conference. Well, I made that point earlier on, didn't I? That sometimes what political parties and activists collectively think is the right thing to do may please them in their own echo chambers, but doesn't actually work outside with the broader electorate. Those that want a second referendum will push for a three-way question deliberately to split the Leave vote, says Paul from Croydon. I've seen this multiple choice idea put around. I do not believe the Electoral Commission would allow a referendum to go forward with three different choices, where we sort of rank them 1, 2, 3. I don't believe they would allow that. They've said before that referendum questions have to be simple and easy to understand, and I do not believe a sort of three-card trick, which is what the Remainers would like to do to split the Leave vote, will be allowed. Naomi is a new caller from Stratford in London. Good morning, Naomi.
Good morning. I sort of wanted to address, firstly, the assertion that Momentum is sort of a London-centric movement, because, there are sort of many sort of classifications within that. So there's, the working class, like myself, typically young. But then, I feel like I probably have a lot of experiences in common with, maybe someone in the north of the UK or someone in Wales, all these sort of quite segregated, our sort of views, we don't get to interact, and it does create this echo chamber. But I don't believe that, I was very angry at the Brexit vote.
Were you?
Yeah, because I thought, it sort of went against all logic of what was good for this country. Economic forecasts have been vastly negative.
But Naomi, we shouldn't believe economic forecasts too much. I mean, they're always wrong.
Yeah, but then there's experts who have, years of knowledge, and is it not sort of right to inform ourselves? I just don't think the dreams that the people, maybe in the north of England, in Wales, the dreams that they were being sold were, sort of untrue, completely untrue. They're baseless, and I think that's completely wrong. And I think the basis of the Leave campaign was very, very, very misleading.
Naomi, the basis of the Leave campaign, and I've been on the Leave campaign for 25 years, right? And I was part of a party whose main name was Independence.
Yeah, but now there are people who are saying that if I knew what I know now, then I would not have voted Leave, and it's that sort of quite important point that it's you have to vote, and you have to know what you're voting for.
Naomi, it was a vote. It was a vote to leave political union. Do we stay part of political union, or do we vote? Hang on, or did we vote? Or did we vote to be? Naomi, hang on. Let's get to the central point here. There are some that believe we're better off economically, strategically, and globally as part of a political union called the EU. There are others of us who believe we should be independent. And the point that I was making about the Labour Party over decades is the mystery to me, Naomi, perhaps you can help me, is why would Labour members want so much of the power over how we live our lives in this country to be with unelected European commissioners?
But then again, what exactly goes against our interests? What in any of the EU directives goes against our interests? Is it really a dictatorship in the sense that it's being made out to be? I just don't believe that at all.
Well, they have the sole right. They have the sole right to propose law. Naomi, look, that's the argument about democracy. We could expand it at another time. You were angry at the Brexit vote. Okay, I hear that very clearly. Do you think that by the Labour Party conference going for a second referendum, it makes Mr. Corbyn more electable?
Honestly, it's hard to say because, like I said, a lot of those people, those sort of disenfranchised people, voted to leave. And I think it's more important that we understand the reasons why they voted to leave. And it is a sort of,
I don't think it's hard.
It's hard. I think, having grown up and lived in London all my life, been in a very sort of ethnically diverse place, it's no sort of mistake that we didn't vote to leave overwhelmingly because, when you live in a place, when you can see diversity, when you can see how it helps the economy, when they're your next door neighbours or your friends, they're your partners, then I don't know how anyone would be able to.
I think you'd be surprised, Naomi.
Their neighbours, their partners.
I think you'd be surprised, Naomi, how many of the black community did vote to leave in London. I think overwhelmingly those that voted to remain in London were those that live in houses worth £1 million or more, and there are lots and lots of them. I think this was much more of a class divide based on money, the referendum, than anything else. Naomi, I've got to let you go. We've run out of time. Thank you. You're listening to the Sunday edition of the Nigel Farage Show here on LBC. It's 10:45. As Labour's about to go for a second referendum, does it help their electoral prospects? Beryl on Facebook says, change of mind, it'd be UKIP for me if they're in a strong position. Well, UKIP actually, in 2015, did incredibly well with Labour voters. They got more Labour voters in 15 than they got Tory voters. Probably helped to get Cameron a majority, strange, or really, or at least win the election. This is political suicide for Labour. It's equal to the Conservative dementia tax. This gives May the opportunity to win a snap election. Well, we'll be talking about that at the top of the hour, because it is now rumoured that Mrs May may well go for a snap election. What's happened to politics? Why are we not listening to the working classes? Well, there we are, Paul. Very, very interesting. And Dave says, I was a traditional Labour voter, but if May dumps Chequers, I would vote Conservative. Giles is calling from Oxford. Good morning, Giles.
Morning, Nigel. Yeah, I think, unfortunately, that, well, it's going to be an absolute home run for the Labour Party, and that you and your callers can have your echo chamber as much as you want. But I think this is a brilliant move, and I think someone said earlier that they've been sat on the fence for 18 months, and finally they're going to have a strong position, and they're going to hoover up some Tory voters, hoover up their voters, and just hoover up all the Remainers. And I think they're going to do pretty well. So bring on the snap election.
Well, Giles, you can talk about echo chambers if you like, but let me just throw this back at you. You know, polling in the Sun newspaper today, when people are given all the choices on Brexit, it's only 25% of the country that actually wants an exit from Brexit. That's it.
But what I would say to that is that exit from Brexit is fine. I voted to remain, and I accept now the decision. We're leaving. That's fine. I accept that. What I don't accept that, as people have been saying, there are more details now to emerge, and I think the people should have a say on what those details are. And for people who are calling in and leaving you messages saying that to have another referendum undermines democracy, no, it doesn't. That is democracy. That's a debate. You know, just because it's a once-in-a-generation thing, that's a bit of hyperbole. It doesn't matter if it's once in a generation or 3 times a generation. You know,
No, Giles, actually it does matter hugely, because, you know, we've always lived in a system here of representative democracy, but with the exceptional occasions on major constitutional type issues, the people have a say. And to, even before Brexit has been pushed through, be attempting to make people vote again is an outrage, Giles.
Well, people voted to leave. That's fine. We accept that, and I accept that. That's absolutely fine. But no one really knew. You didn't know. No one knew what the outcome of that would be. You're right, we're months away from this happening, and we can see some of the consequences that will be happening, and then amplified once we leave. You know, economic damage and all of these things.
Would be a great country, independent, respected around... Giles, we could argue this both ways. You know, you could say it's going to be a bad thing. I can say it's going to be a very, very good thing. Giles, isn't the point... And you say you accept we're leaving. But those that are pushing this motion at the Labour Party conference want us to have a referendum where we have the option to remain in the European Union. Isn't that the point?
Well, have they said that? Have they said that categorically? Or
yes,
have they said they will be open to a people's vote?
Every single person who is pushing the people's vote wants the option to be either we accept the deal or we remain. That is what they're pushing for.
I think they're just going to test the water. They'll realise that, yes, absolutely, people would flock to the Labour Party regardless of their previous politics.
But who?
But every Remainer ever will flock to the Labour Party. The Tory voters who are fed up with Mrs May and her dancing in Africa will flock to the Labour Party.
Well, all right. OK, her dancing didn't win her any votes. I mean, I'll give you that, Giles, absolutely. But Giles... Surely, 48% voted to remain, but of those who voted to remain, a third of those, quite consistently in the last 2 years, say that we've had a vote, we respect democracy, can we please just get on with Brexit? I just don't see where this vast number of voters comes from.
Well, I'd say, get on with Brexit, that's fine. But if Mrs May is really preparing for a snap election, then bring it on. Absolutely bring it on. See what happens.
All right, well, do you know what? It may come to that. Giles, I thank you very much indeed for your call. Let's go to Kevin, who's calling, another new caller to this show. They're all new callers to this show, and he's from Wainfleet in Lincolnshire. Kevin, hi.
Hello, Nigel. Couple of questions. How many Labour members were actually asked about do they want another referendum? And also, I'm a GMB member, and now I found out that the GMB support a second vote. Well, nobody asked me. I pay my money each month. Nobody came up to me and said, what do you think, Kevin?
I suggest you complain, Kevin, to the GMB.
I have complained, and all. I'm pushed from pillar to post. I mean, and that's democracy, is it? In my union, unbelievable. Another thing I wanted to ask you is the word "people's vote." It all sounds so nice and snug.
I know.
It should really be called the death of democracy vote.
Well, Kevin, you obviously feel very strongly about this.
Oh, definitely. And if we do have this death of democracy vote and the Brexit people win it again, someone needs to pin Nick Cable down and say, right, tell me, Nick, what will you accept? 60-40 win?
No, Kevin, they will never accept it. They never, ever will. And, of course, these globalists, these pro-EU people are used to having their own way. They made the Danes vote again after a referendum. They've made the Irish vote twice after a referendum. The big bullies have always had their way. Kevin, let me ask you something. Have you always voted Labour?
No, not always. I've
Not al-
voted UKIP quite a few times. I'm one of the. I live in an area in Lincolnshire which is staunch Conservative.
Yeah.
So whatever I vote, it doesn't count.
Yeah.
But I always make sure I vote. You know, I will always vote for an independent, UKIP, but we have. It's always going to be a Conservative up here. I mean,
No, I get that. I get that. But in other parts of the country, Kevin, there'll be people who are members of the GMB like you are,
Yes.
who probably always voted Labour because they didn't want the Tories to win the seat. You know, if Corbyn accepts this party vote, which he said he will, to have a second referendum, isn't that going to damage their prospects of winning?
Yes, because I've spoke about this at work with a couple of Labour supporters, and they've said that they would never vote Labour again.
No.
Never. They voted to remain, but they've accepted it, and they said we didn't like it, but two of them that I've spoken to have said they wish they had voted to leave. They said after they've seen the way that we've been treated.
Well, isn't
by
that the
media,
point? Isn't
and
that the
they-
point? What a bunch of gangsters, Kevin, aren't they? They're a bunch of gangsters over there.
Well, basically, yeah. I mean, they've trying to hold us. I just wish Mrs May last week had said, do you know what? That's it, we're off. Ta-da. Yeah, we're off.
Well,
and I'm pretty sure you would have had Tusk and his little entourage running after us saying, oh, please, no, stop, because we've got Mr BMW on the phone at the moment and he's worried about his car sales.
Kevin, great call. Thank you very much. Do call again. Kevin there, GMB member, saying there are others in his union who do not feel good about this. Sean in Suffolk says, so, 2 days after the EU disrespect the leader of our government, the Labour Party is still pursuing a vote to remain in the group. Discuss. Sean, you're absolutely right. Didn't they behave abominably? Ian in Runcorn feels quite strongly. Nigel, let's start calling this what it is. A loser's vote, not a people's vote. Let's go to James in Hatfield, another new caller to this show. And my last one on this subject, I think. James, good morning.
Hi, good morning, Nigel. How are you?
I am well. So, does this help Corbyn win the election or hurt?
No, I think it severely damages the credibility of Labour, in my opinion.
Yeah.
As a sort of previous history, a bit of a swing voter in my younger years, sort of mainly for Labour. But I'd say the past decade, I felt more of a disconnect to sort of the way they're going about the politics.
OK, this hurts them. James, I'm going to let you go. I'm going to squeeze very quickly. Time is tight. Deborah is a Labour member from Deptford. Good morning, Deborah.
Nigel.
Hello, good morning. I'm sorry time is tight, but you're a Labour member, I understand.
I am, yes. And I joined when Jeremy Corbyn became leader of the party, and I support him in many things, I do think that he is Eurosceptic. Mm-hmm. And I voted to leave, and I just really hope they don't make the mistake of offering, but I fear what you say is right. They are going to vote at conference to vote for a second referendum, but I do think it might lose in the general election, and I don't think it will do much for their standing, really.
Yeah, I mean, Jeremy Corbyn is boxed in here, isn't he? He's almost got no choice, has he?
This is it. I don't think he really wants to do it, but what can he do? Because, momentum and that are the ones that give him the momentum behind his leadership, and I agree with him on so many things, you know what I mean? But I just do not... I think at some point you just got to put country before party.
Oh,
and I think this
I
is
love
one of
that
the things
phrase.
You've got to do, because I just think the European Union is so undemocratic.
Deborah,
and if people were educated about it, they'd realise.
Deborah, you've ended this hour's debate beautifully on this by talking about country before party. Absolutely, I agree with you 100%. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for your calls on that.